The following is a recording of a live Learn-A-Latte Zoom that was held on Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. We were joined by Ms. Julie Nelson, Assistant Dean of Admissions from Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio. Thank you for joining us. Good morning. My name is Christopher Chaklas. I'm the post-secondary counselor. I'm sure you all here know that. And welcome to another Learn-A-Latte event. This is an event where we connect with parents on things that are going on in your student's life at Hersey and or life after Hersey, hence the la part of latte. And this is a great example tonight of our college fair. It's something that's happening during your student's life at Hersey that will depend on their life after Hersey. Just kind of a quick recap, since this is meant for junior parents, so you should all probably be here for your junior student or students. We just met with them last week. All the counselors did for what we very unimaginatively or uncreatively called Junior Guidance Part 2. But really quick recap. Back in October, we met with them for Part 1 to talk about how to start forming that college list. We looked at what we call the 5 Ps. Who are they as a person? What kind of people do they want to kind of go to college with? The place, whether that's the size, location, distance from home, all that kind of thing. The program, does it have the major that they want? And then the price, what is the price? And so we tasked them over the last 5 months or so to explore those things for themselves individually. What are they looking for? And use Naviance, our super match function, and start building a list of colleges that met all of those criteria that they wanted in a school, and define schools that had what they wanted. And so hopefully they were able to do that. If they weren't sure for any of those 5 Ps, they were encouraged to go visit or talk to people, talk to reps, do those kind of things, and start to find out what they want. So if they weren't sure if they wanted a big, small, medium school, go visit some different size schools and kind of hopefully narrow it down that way. From there, if they had a list of places that they wanted to go, that's great. But as I'm sure you're aware, just because you want something, it doesn't mean they're going to necessarily want you back. We have related it to a relationship. You know, I could want to date somebody all I want, but if they don't want me back, it's not a match, it's something else. We talked last week about how do we know if a college is going to want us back or not? And that's, of course, very tricky. But some of the things that we talked about were the mid 50% for ranges for GPA and SAT scores, as well as admit rates. And a lot of that conversation, at least especially the classes I presented to personally, were you have to do some more research. You have to really look into that school. How does that school admit? Do they admit by major? Do they admit by university overall? How does test scores, if at all, play into it? You know, how does the financial aid or scholarships, work? How do we know that this is going to be a good academic, social, and financial fit for those students? And we say that every year around this time, senior year, we have, unfortunately, students coming in a panic, and parents, because their list initially wasn't balanced. Either they did not get into all the schools they thought because they had too many reach schools, or they didn't take a look at the financial piece enough. And so while they got into places, now they're stressed on how am I going to afford this? And I related to things like, buying a house. It's a big process, right? You don't just look on Redfin and pick one and go. You do research. I know when I purchased my last home, we went 2 or 3 times. We brought the inspector, we brought the contractor to see how much that would cost. You shop around for financial, for loans. And honestly, there are colleges out there that cost more than the home I bought. And so if you're going to, if you're going to put that kind of research into a purchase like that, you're going to want to put that research in here. So with all that said, a college fair like tonight is a great way to do a lot of research. There are a lot of schools, over 200 in one place. And you have the opportunity to talk to people who work directly for those schools. So when you have questions about that school, those people work for them. So they're the experts on that school. So you can go around and get that direct information instead of going to Reddit or a Facebook parent group, which have some purposes. It's best to go directly to the sources for the people who work for that school. And so it's a great opportunity. That's why we plug it so much. Now, on the flip side, there are going to be over 200 schools there, and so it can be overwhelming for students and parents to walk into the field house at Forest View and see over 150 tables set up, and then go down the hall to the North Gym and see over 50 more tables lined up. How do you navigate all that in 2 hours? And so that's what we're going to kind of talk about here in a second. But just want to reiterate a couple of things while we're here. If you haven't had a chance yet to explore in advance our website and kind of get a little sneak peek at what's going to happen. So in the chat, hopefully, is the link that you can go to. If that doesn't work, I'll put the actual other link here to our fair website. Maybe that's better. Our fair, you can kind of see in the background what it will look like. Also, if you look at, hopefully you can see this is a picture from Twitter. This is Forest View last year. This is the field house, so you can see all the colleges lined up. Forest View got a new gym because there's no more Robert Morris, so that's the only difference. But otherwise, it'll look pretty much exactly the same. So on the fair website, there's you can get a PDF of the booklet that we gave to all the juniors. This weird with my background, sorry. You can see it there, but all the same information is basically here. If your student did not register with Strive Fair, that's really important that they do that in advance. There is a parent sign up, which I've mentioned in email, and I'll ask Julie a little bit about that in a minute. What's the point of that? Why is that different? If your student can't remember if they registered or whatever, just register again. And what's nice is their students' information isn't shared with anyone they don't want to share it with. So if they don't want any of the other schools, they just want Xavier to get their info, they just go up to Xavier, get it scanned, and it's not going anywhere else. Participating colleges, they're printed in the book, but we've had a lot of, not a lot, but a few cancellations. So in this yellowy off-white color, anyone who has had to cancel for various reasons, you'll see is crossed out. And unless they are going to leave materials, there won't be a table or anything for them. Again, A through G will be in the North Gym. And when we say A, University of Akron, Alabama, that's under A's and not U's. And then H through Z will be in the field house. The one exception this year is we are going to pull U of I out into our theater so that historically they've had really long lines, and we would hate for you to spend half the time in line for one school at the expense of seeing some of the other great schools that are there and getting the information from them. So they're going to do quick 15, 20-minute presentations tops. That way you can get the info you would have otherwise gotten in twice as long waiting in line. So that's the one difference this year. We'll talk about some important questions to ask, but if you forget while you're there, we have this as well as in the printed copy, just some sample questions that you can ask. And then lastly, logistics. Just make sure you go to Forest View. We are not going to open the doors until 6 p.m. You're going to enter kind of in this middle area here. Here's Gilbert Road. If you've been there, there's parking all over the place, but you're going to enter door 1 and 34 kind of right next to each other. This is like the theater where U of I will be. And so you can kind of look at this on your own, but just kind of keep that in mind. We will have a hard close at 8 o'clock tonight. So with that said, if there's any further questions about the logistics, feel free to email me. I will be at Forest View most of the day setting up, but I will try to get back to you. Otherwise, please take a look at that website. So I thought who better to talk about what some do's and don'ts of the fair and like how you can best navigate it by bringing in someone who's been to quite a few fairs herself. Hopefully she's had a chance to, I'm sure maybe you had a chance to go with your own kids, unless I know one of them is at Xavier. So maybe that was an easy one, but If they're looking somewhere else, you had a chance as a parent version, on the parent side as well. Julie Nelson from Xavier. So Julie, thank you so much for joining us bright and early this morning.
You are so welcome. I'm so glad to be here. And I could fib and say, oh, I'm coming to you from Cincinnati where it's 8:30, but I'm based here. We get about 10% of our students from the Chicago area. So it's 7:30 where I am too, friends. Glad to be here.
Yes, thank you. And we'll, of course, see Julie tonight live in person at the fair. So one of the things, and parents, if they've been looking at any of the stuff or attended any of my presentations in the past, know that I'm a big proponent of the students driving this bus. This is their future. They'll hear me say in the fall, they need to be the ones doing their application, writing their essays, reaching out with questions. But because this is a daunting decision for a 16, 17, 18-year-old, of course, and a huge financial investment in some cases where the parents are involved. This isn't something that the students should do completely alone. So the biggest question that a lot of our parents had was, how do our students and how do we as parents navigate something like this fair? And what is our role as the parent versus maybe what the role of the student is? So maybe we can kind of start there
Sure.
with, maybe what should we expect, what should the student do, and what maybe can the parent do?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the students first, and then I'll kind of transition over to the parents. Two things, I guess, to start out with. One, it is overwhelming, even for folks like me. This is my 30th year doing college admissions, and I will look around those gyms sometimes and think there are schools here that I haven't heard of. And so it's like, oh my gosh, where do I even start? I think our natural inclination as humans is to start alphabetically. I will say, on behalf of myself and my friends at the end of the alphabet, you don't have to do that. I think, you've got a great booklet with all of the schools that are listed. You can check out the website right now. I think my first piece of advice, look at the schools that are coming and maybe highlight a few that you absolutely want to talk to. Just to kind of get a sense of, okay, we have 2 hours. How's the best way to attack this? Here are the places we definitely want to see. I will also say that from my vantage point behind the college fair table, a lot of times families come in, and because it feels overwhelming, the eyes just glaze over. And, again, as the last table, a lot of times I'm also the first table for some families. And so they'll walk up to me and like, what are we supposed to do? And what I like to tell the students always is it's kind of like trick or treating. And that breaks the ice just a little bit to let them know it's okay. We're not expecting any of the college reps, we're not expecting that you've done one of these before, that you know what to ask, that you know what to expect. So by framing it as trick or treating, it feels a little less terrifying maybe to students. I'm like, you're going to walk up to the table with a bag in hand. You're going to ask one or two questions. The person behind the table is going to answer that question, give you something to put in your bag. And at the end of the night, go home, dump that bag out on the living room floor, see what you got, put them into piles. We love this one. We were okay with this one. This one was nice, but not really what we're looking for. So again, yes, this is a big decision. Yes, this is, your future at stake. But at the same time, this is a very low pressure way of getting to know these schools and starting to really engage with the folks behind the table. And that's the other piece of this that I really want to impress, is that the person standing behind the table representing that college or university oftentimes is the person you will work with for the next year and a half, if you're bringing sophomores, 2 years, to be able to really guide you through this process. And that's my job. My job is obviously to be a representative of my institution, to tell people, here's all the reasons I think Xavier is great and why it might be a great fit for you. But that's the important part of this equation. Is it a great fit for you? And so not only am I, obviously promoting my school, but if you and I have a conversation and somewhere in that conversation, I realize what you're looking for, we don't really have. I am probably going to refer you to other tables at the fair. And I think most of my colleagues at other institutions would do the same thing. If you ask me for a program I don't have, I can't help you, but I can say, check out these programs at these other schools. So it's really a conversation. So as parents, I like to use the analogy, and my mom always used to say, parents give their children two things. They give them roots and they give them wings. Tonight's the first chance for you to really see, okay, in this college search process, will the wings work? So tonight, yes, be there with your student, but let your student do the talking. And even if you have to stand back from the table and kind of prep them, like, okay, when you walk up there, introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Katie. I go to Hersey. Can you tell me a little bit about your school? That's all that student needs to say. But I think that shows a lot of initiative on the student's part. And for you as a parent, if they kind of get stuck, if they're like, oh gosh, what was I supposed to say? You can jump in. But I think kind of giving them that ability to drive the bus, if we're going to use that analogy, to be the person who is taking charge of this process, you're really there to be their cheerleader, their supporter, to maybe ask a question or two that they wouldn't know to ask. If you know that they need some support in the classroom, or that, dance is really important to them, or they really want to play, a sport or something, go ahead and jump in with those questions, but let the student ask the first question.
Awesome. Thank you. Great advice, of course. And yeah, we do set up alphabetically. And so one pro tip is everyone will probably just go to the first table they see. So go to the back of the room, start with Julie in the back and the Z's, and I don't know if we have any Z's, but whatever, and then work your way.
I'm always the caboose, always the caboose.
Work your way like forward alphabetically, and that way there won't be lines and so on back there. So, are there any specific questions that would be better maybe for a parent to ask? Not better, but you would see okay, this is a parent question. I wouldn't expect a student versus if a parent asks a question, that should have came from the student. Does that make sense? Is there something
Sure.
like that?
So I think, obviously from students, I would expect questions about size and academics and location, and maybe even things like, how do I get involved, or what are the dorms like, those sorts of things. Certainly parent questions tend to lean towards the financial piece. And I think a lot of times, you can lead with, what kind of scholarships do you offer, or how do students get those scholarships? I think the other piece of this is certainly when you get the brochure at the table and flip that brochure over or open it up to whatever page talks about the financial reality of college. Remember that the number that you see on that page is before any kind of financial aid or scholarship is involved. So if you're just looking at, what is tuition, room and board, fees, that number most often is going to start with a 5 or a 6. Depending which tables you're at, you might see a 7 or 2 tonight. So don't let that scare you away. Don't be like, oh my gosh, we can't afford college. I think really a great question for parents to ask is, okay, we talked about the total cost. We talked about scholarships. What does an average family pay? Now, remember, there's a lot of variation in financial aid, but I think all of us could tell you, what I see day in and day out, most families are looking at something around this number. Don't hold us to it, because obviously there's a lot of factors. But, if somebody's looking at a total price tag of, say, 73, and what they're really paying out of pocket is, 22, okay, there's a huge difference there. And, don't, again, run away screaming because that number seems insurmountable, I guess, at the front end.
Yeah, and one of the tips I know some of the counselors were giving students last week too is were asked them, have you had the money conversation with parents? And I know I've mentioned this to parents as well too, this is the time to be upfront with them. I know it's an awkward conversation to tell your student how much you have or don't have to pay for school, but that can be an important factor in driving what schools you look at. And that's where we end up with students who who have applied to a bunch of places that their family can't afford, and either their parents never told them they couldn't afford it, or they just didn't listen. So have those conversations like, this is our budget, or you student, or you're going to be on the hook for X amount. And then maybe you don't visit schools that have, price tags that are out, and you may not have time to do that deep dive research today. But kind of keep that in mind, have those conversations, have also the conversation about like place. Are you going to let your kid go to California or Hawaii or somewhere else? Or are you looking at a radius around here? Or what are your parameters as a parent? So that you're not going to schools that, afterwards, like, yeah, you're never going there for X, Y, and Z. And so hopefully you have those honest conversations to make the most out of your time, as well.
Yeah, and I would say too, don't ignore the schools you've never heard of. This, to be really honest, this is fair 2 in a week of 4 fairs. So last night, the college tour, if you will, we were at Barrington High School. Tonight we're at Forest View. Tomorrow we're at Lyons Township, and then on Thursday we're at the Glenbrooks. And so this is a big week for schools from all over the world. There was a whole row last night of international colleges at the college fair to send their representatives out. So there are going to be schools that there's going to be schools that everybody knows, particularly here in the Midwest. But at the same time, there's going to be schools that you look at and you think, I don't know that I've ever heard of that place. If you're standing in line, and there are going to be schools for whom you will stand in line, there are 10 of them. Oh, I'm sorry. There's 12 of them, if you get my drift. So if you're standing in line and you realize, oh, I could be talking to Rutgers, but here's Rollins College, which I've never heard, in Florida, I've never heard of this. Ask 2 questions, pick up the brochure. Don't just pretend like they're not there. And I think that's to be really honest, after 30 years of standing behind a table, that's, I think, one of the biggest frustrations from my side of the table, is that we are here to open your list up, to say, here are places that maybe you haven't heard of that could be a perfect fit for you. But, again, we know what we know. And so we stand behind everybody else in the line for those 8 or 10 or 15 schools that seem to be in the top 10 list, and not always, talk to some of these places that might, quite frankly, be the best place for you. So make sure that even if you just walk by, you're like, I've never heard of you. Can you tell me like 2 facts about your school? Where are you and how big are you and what's your biggest major? Give it a try. We're nice people. My kids, when they were little, so I have a son who's a junior at Xavier. I have a freshman who is a freshman high school at Batavia High School. They used to tell people that my job was talking to strangers for a living. Fair. That's what I do. But hopefully by the time you leave my table, you're not a stranger anymore. We've exchanged enough information that we feel like we know each other. And that's really what this college fair is about.
For sure. Yeah. And I've sent the parents a list, and you can look back on our website, of the reps who normally come during the year as well. So, your student has an opportunity to talk to them, while they come to Hersey. Obviously, if a school is close by, you can easily drive there and get, a VIT tour and an admission. So yeah, if there's a school who is a little harder to physically visit, or those reps maybe don't come, definitely take this opportunity to talk to them. And then the other schools, you can always, email or set up another, appointment or whatever on your own as well. So as we're getting close to running out of time, just a couple other things to kind of cover here. I'm just looking back at the questions. So some of you had like, is there a top 3 questions or most important questions? I would say, and Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, we kind of covered this, but whatever's most important to you, like, what do you need to know? And I would say, what can't you just easily Google on their website? So one of the things we talked about is, how do colleges admit? Are they admitting overall? Are they admitting by major? Are they like, how easy, if is it direct into that major, or can you decide? Especially if you're an undecided, is your students undecided for their major? Are they going all in at a school in that particular major? Is that major harder to get into? So maybe some more of those kind of specifics that you can't just look up as easy, but whatever's most important, whatever's on their mind. If it's how to be an athlete and be a student, if it's studying abroad, if it's a pre-professional program, well, whatever is most important, that should be your top, 3 questions. Some of you put in some other questions that aren't necessarily related to the fair, like, applying early, should you apply early, or a student or college is looking more at A's and regular courses or whatever. Maybe those are questions you ask the rep, because each college might have a different answer. So again, if that's something that's on your mind or your student's mind, or scholarships are on their mind, like we said before, those would be the questions, like whatever is going to help you get a better idea of the school and if it's going to be a good fit, for your students. So,
and I think that's a great point. I mean, if there's almost 200 of us at the fair tonight, you could ask a question like, can you tell me about your admission process? And you'll get 200 answers. And so that's why it's really important to start that relationship with the person behind the desk, because while the basic umbrella of how to apply to college is pretty much the same, the minutia from school to school is very different. And so we're here to guide you through this process. This isn't like a Miss America pageant or something where we're trying to pick the best kid from the ones that line up in front of our table tonight. Really, we're just here to make sure that you get the information you need so that as we move forward, you're well prepared. I will also say this is another plug for Strive Fairs. Definitely have your students sign up for that. It makes the process way easier. It's way faster to get through the fair. And Strive Fairs has also added a new feature so that if you don't get to see all the colleges you wanted to tonight, you run out of time or you get there late, whatever it might be, there is a missed connections feature. So if hey, the line was really long, we wanted to get to these other schools, but we definitely want information from school A or school B, whatever, you can go back into the Strive Fair, click the ones you want information from, and we'll get your information. So it really makes it very handy to say, I have made the most, even if I did not have that one-on-one conversation.
And I know they've added the parent part too. So can you kind of maybe talk about, like, if a parent, we've mentioned, like, some students have track meets but parents want info. They shouldn't scan it as the kid. They should do the parent one. Can you tell us what the parent one is and why it's important for parents to use the parent one and not?
Sure. So I'll use Xavier as an example. So for all of our communication to prospective students, and actually to applied students as well, we copy parents on that information. We also have separate parent information, kind of how to support your student in the process, what kinds of things you can do to kind of guide them along. And then certainly how we support not only our students when they become musketeers, but how we support our families, as your child goes through college. So we like to have both a student and a parent email for that very reason. The other thing being, the mom of high school and college kids don't always read their email, right? And so we want to be sure that you are getting the messages, even if they don't get forwarded on to you, or maybe they don't get read at all. So this way we're not sending, you as a mom, hi, Patricia, we hope you're going to apply. And you're like, I'm not the one applying. It's my kid applying. So again, we can customize those messages a little bit more. Sorry, Patricia, I picked on you. You were right in the middle of the screen.
Would you recommend, like, if students are with their parents, should both scan, or is just the student enough? And as long as they put the parent info in there, then the parent will get it.
There is a field in the student record for parent email. So if it's the student, great. If it's just the parent at the fair, I would love to have just the parent register and then include the student email. Then we'll do the same thing the other way around.
A question about if kids can't make it tonight because they have competitions or whatever, should they go to another college fair? All of us that are a part of the IACAC fairs technically are open. So as Julie said, there's Glenbrook later this week, Lions. I think you can go to, it'd be best if they can go themselves and get the information. So if you can make it to one of the other fairs, I would recommend that. If you
The
need
other thing too is if you, I'm sorry, I interrupted. When, if the parent comes tonight and does this drive-in and gets scanned, tomorrow morning you'll get an email that says, here's the contact information for all of the schools you scanned. Here's the person on that side from that school that you'll be working with. So I think, if there is a school or two that your student's really interested in, that they weren't able to come to the fair tonight, just sending that email to say, hey, I had a track meet last night, wasn't able to come, but I'm really interested. I had this one question, or, we're going to be in Milwaukee over the summer. How do I visit school? So you can softball those questions, but again, it's showing some interest on the student's part.
Great, thank you. Our time technically is up. If there's any last questions, please put them in now. Otherwise, hopefully everybody will be able to make it tonight. Students, parents, but hopefully we'll have a great big turnout with over 200 colleges tonight. Again, please expand your list, your students list. And one last thing along with that, if you see no one standing at a table, that can be a chance for some of those reps to give you some almost private counseling about the process too. Not even just about their school, just about the whole process in general. And I know, a lot of the reps, most of the reps, if not all the reps, just love talking with students and helping them through the process. They are not on commission. They're not, all that. They are here just like the high school side to help you all your students find their best fit. And so you may, I've heard parents in the past say, we ended up talking to such and such school and they just gave us all this great overall information. They just love talking to us. And so don't dismiss those opportunities as well. Again, this is a great opportunity to dive into some of the research so that your students come back in August with a list that is going to be good fits. They're going to have options that they can get in, they can afford, and that they will be successful at when they go there. So with that said, I'm going to head over to Forest View and start making sure the tables start getting set up. Julie, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate you joining us bright and early. If you're there tonight, feel free to stop by the Xavier table and thank her in person and hear more about that great school out there in Cincinnati. And with that said, everybody have a great day and hopefully we'll see you tonight. Thank you.